Hello everyone, welcome to ChessWiser. In today's video, I am going to show you another interesting game played between Richard Rapport and Magnus Carlsen. This is from the round number 1 of the Grenke Chess Classic. Without much delay, let's get started. With white pieces, Richard Rapport starts the game with 1 e4 and Magnus goes with the Caracan defense. Variation wise, we are seeing the tall variation of the Caracan. After h4, we are seeing pawn to h5. Bishop d3 exchange happens on the d3 square. Queen a5 check, pawn c3 blocking the check, and also pawn to e6 closing down the or strengthening the center, the triangle or the pyramid pawn structure of the Caracan. So that's why we call it as a solid defense for black. Pawn to a4 and now strikes in the center with the pawn c5. After d takes c5, queen takes c5 was played. So in this position, if you are thinking about bringing the bishop with the developing move, that is a problem because of the fourth. So he plays queen takes c5, knight f3, and then queen to c7, trying to put pressure on this weak pawn. Knight to a3. Now that the knight is coming to b5 or to c2, depending upon how black reacts. So here Magnus could have played a6 to stop knight to b5 idea, but then he simply played a bishop takes a3. So rook takes a3 was played, and then knight to d7. So castles by Rickett. So here after knight e7 he plays. So here another interesting idea, or if you are wondering why black is not capturing this pawn, it's because the king is still in the center. You have a light square weakness. The queen is looking actively to go to the f5 square. That is the problem, or that is the reason why Magnus couldn't take the pawn on e5. If you do so, say for example, I can simply take back. After queen takes, I go queen b5 check, king f8, and then I can take or win a pawn on b7. But then the problem is your king is going to be in the center for the rest of the game, or it's very difficult for you to save the game. And also, if you are say for example, if you move the rook, you're going to lose this pawn as well. So you have to bring back the queen back, but then I can play rook b3. This is completely winning already for white. So considering this small trap, he plays knight e6, sorry, e7, rook e1, defending the pawn now, rook to c8, and then queen to d1. So after queen to d1, he plays a6, and then bishop to g5. So bishop g5 temporarily, stops Carlsen to castle on the king side. So he plays knight g6 to, getting ready to castle. So a5, and then Carlsen simply castle on the king side. So here also there is a the simple thought that why black cannot capture here. Let's say you take on e5 with the d knight, and then knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and now I can play bishop f4 pinning down the knight. And after you play pawn f6 defending the knight, now I can go queen a4 check. After queen blocks the check, I can simply play bishop takes e5, f takes e5, and then rook takes e5. Okay, that is a weak pawn on e6, and for the rest of the game you are going to defend those weaknesses, and white is going to simply keep attacking without much problem, or black is the one who is going to defend with the rooks. Okay, still it is completely defendable, but still you have a weak pawn on e6. This is a long time weakness for black. In the game, what happened, considering this, he simply castled. After rook a4, now the rook is lifted, and it is looking at this h4 square as well now. So rook c e8, and then rook to d4. So after rook to d4, Magnus simply chopped the pawn in the center now. But now, after all the transaction, as you can see, the king is castled. The rook is not on h8 anymore, so you are going to lose the pawn and pawn on h5 anyway. But here he plays bishop f4, the in between move, and then pawn f6 forces the pawn to move, and then he takes on h5. And here Magnus played a queen to f7, trying to trade the queens off the board. And here Rickard Rapport simply exchanges the queens. So in this position, don't be greedy and capture the a5 pawn. You can capture, but the problem is I can take on e5 after f takes e5. Now that I can play the move queen takes e5, and then the structural weakness is going to be the same idea which we discussed already. In the game, he played queen f7, queen takes f7, king knight takes f7. Now that the pawn is going to getting ready to fork you, so the bishop or the rook has to move. So bishop goes to h2, king h7, and then pawn to g4. So maybe it's to stop the king side expansion. knight to d8, and then bishop to d6, hitting the rook, and the rook moves away, and then rook to b4. After rook to b4, now that b7 is under pressure, but then Carlsen plays this interesting move, that is knight c6, because if you capture my b7 pawn, I'm going to capture your a5 pawn. That's what happened in the game as well. So rook to d7, and then he played knight to c4, attacking the bishop and also the b2 pawn, and the pawn moves forward b3, and then knight to d2. So you have to be careful now. So there is this forking square is available without any defense. So here he plays rook e2, just getting out of the fork. So knight takes b3 now. For the time being, Magnus is up a pawn. After bishop e7, trying to win a pawn, so he unpins the pawn by moving the king to f1, pawn to e5, and then rook to b2, threatening the knight. The knight goes to a5, and now he can target this weak pawn, so he plays rook b6. And also sometimes there is tactical ideas on f6 square. So knight to c4, threatening the rook, and now the rook simply takes on a6 after rook a8. So here another interesting point is that you cannot put the rook on a8 immediately because of the tactics. So that's why Magnus played a knight c4, and then rook takes a6, and then he played rook a8. So here he exchanges the rook takes a8, and then rook takes d5. And now after exchanging, or the getting the pawn back, now actually Rickard Rapport is up a pawn. Rook a2, just putting the rook in an active square. So bishop c5, covering f2, and also maybe paving the way for the rook to d7 square. After rook to c2, there is a threat of capturing the pawn. So here actually white can ignore the threat on the pawn and play this stunning move, that is rook to d7. It is just that we are going to trying to attack the pawns which is sitting on the dark square. Say for example, if you are going with your plan, that is to take the free pawn, then I can go bishop f8, and then the pawn is going to fall. Otherwise, if you consider some other options like king to g6, just to get out of the pin, but the problem is still I can play bishop f8 and win the pawn, and also the king h7. Now you are actually running into this pin. So again, bishop f8 wins the game for white. Not wins the game, maybe it could be a winning advantage, but we are not sure about that. But that was like a good move for white. But in the game, what happened? He played rook to d3, guarding the pawn. But now Magnus played this very bad move, or the blunder, knight to d2 check. So in the last video, we checked the game played between Faustino and Carlsen, where he blundered the knight on a2. It might be a coincidence. The coincidence is that he is blundering the knight on the second rank. So that's what. So knight to d2 check. So it's a big blunder, right? So it's a free piece. He just captures it, and realizing that it is a blunder, Magnus Carlsen simply resigned the game. So why it's a reasonable position is that you cannot recapture the piece because of the 4 coming. So if you take on c3, and white is going to keep the piece, and you're going to get tortured the end game. So why to continue that? So that's why, considering this, Magnus Carlsen, after taking on d2 by Rickard Rapport, he simply resigned the game. I hope you enjoyed this quick review of this game. Don't forget to check the game played between Faustino and Magnus Carlsen, where Faustino only took 38 seconds to checkmate, or make Magnus to resign. And I am linking that video in the end screen. Please check that. And if you like this quick review, please like this video, and still if you're not subscribed to this channel, consider subscribing to it. As usual, this is Chess Wiser, your wise choice to improve your chess.